Hey! Habari zenu! Wa Kenya impio. It is great to be back in Kenya. Thank you so much for this extraordinary welcome. I know it took a few years, but as president, I try to keep my promises. And I said I was going to come, and I'm here. So, and everybody, go ahead and have a seat. I'm going to be talking for a while. Relax. I want to thank my sister Alma for a wonderful introduction. I'm so glad that she could be with us here today, and it was, as she said, it was Alma who first guided me through Kenya almost 30 years ago. To President Kenyatta, I want to thank you once again for the hospitality that you've shown me, for our work together on this visit, and for being here today. It's a great honor. I am proud to be the first American president to come to Kenya. And of course, I'm the first Kenyan American to be president of the United States. That goes without saying. I love you back. I do. But as Alma was saying, the first time I came to Kenya, things were a little different. When I arrived at Kenyatta Airport, the airline had lost my bags. That doesn't happen on Air Force One. They always have my luggage on Air Force One. As she said, Alma picked me up in an old Volkswagen Beetle. And I think the entire stay I was here, it broke down 4 or 5 times. We'd be on the highway, we'd have to call the Joakali. He'd bring his tools. We'd be sitting there waiting. And I slept on a cot in her apartment. Instead of eating at fancy banquets with the president, we were drinking tea and eating ugali, and sukuma wiki, and so there wasn't a lot of luxury. Sometimes the lights would go out. They still do, is that what someone said? But you know, there was something more important than luxury on that first trip. And that was a sense of being recognized, being seen. I was a young man, and I was just a few years out of university. I'd worked as a community organizer in low-income neighborhoods in Chicago. I was about to go to law school, and when I came here, you know, in many ways I was a Westerner. I was an American, unfamiliar with my father and his birthplace, really disconnected from half of my heritage. And at that airport, as I was trying to find my luggage, there was a woman there who worked for the airlines, and she was helping fill out the forms, and she saw my name, and she looked up and she asked if I was related to my father, who she had known. And that was the first time that my name meant something, right? And that it was recognized. And over the course of several weeks, I'd meet my brothers, aunts, and uncles. I'd travel to Alego, the village where my family was from. I saw the graves of my father and my grandfather. And I learned things about their lives that I could have never learned through books. And in many ways, their lives offered snapshots of Kenya's history. But they also told us something about the future. My grandfather, for example, he was a cook for the British. And as I went through some of his belongings when I went up country, I found the passbook he had had to carry as a domestic servant. It listed his age and his height, his tribe, listed the number of teeth he had missing. And he was referred to as a boy, even though he was a grown man in that passbook. And he was in the King's African Rifles during the Second World War and was taken to the far reaches of the British Empire, all the way to Burma. And back home, after the war, he was eventually detained for a time because he was linked to a group that opposed British rule. And eventually he was released. He forged a home for himself and his family. He earned the respect of his village, lived a life of dignity, although he had a well-earned reputation for being so strict that everybody was scared of him. And he became estranged from part of his family. So that was his story. And then my father came of age as Kenyans were pursuing independence. And he was proud to be a part of that liberation generation. And next to my grandfather's papers, I found letters that he had written to 30 American universities asking for a chance to pursue his dream and get a scholarship. And ultimately, one university gave him that chance, the University of Hawaii. And he would go on to get an education and then return home. And here, at first, he found success as an economist and worked with the government, but ultimately he found disappointment in part because he couldn't reconcile the ideas that he had for his young country with the hard realities that had confronted him. And I think sometimes about what these stories tell us, what the history and the past tell us about the future. And they show us the enormous barriers to progress that so many Kenyans faced just 1 or 2 generations ago. This is a young country. We were talking last night at dinner. The president's father was the first president. We're only a generation removed. And the daily limitations and sometimes humiliations of colonialism, that's recent history. The corruption and cronyism and tribalism that sometimes confront young nations, that's recent history. But what these stories also tell us is an arc of progress, from foreign rule to independence, from isolation to education and engagement with a wider world. It speaks of incredible progress. So we have to know the history of Kenya, just as we Americans have to know our American history. All people have to understand where they come from. But we also have to remember why these lessons are important. We know our history so that we can learn from it. We learn our history because we understand the sacrifices that were made before, so that when we make sacrifices, we understand we're doing it on behalf of future generations. There's a proverb that says, "We have not inherited this land from our forebears, we have borrowed it from our children." In other words, we study the past so it can guide us into the future and inspire us to do better. And when it comes to the people of Kenya, particularly the youth, I believe there is no limit to what you can achieve. A young, ambitious Kenyan today should not have to do what my grandfather did and serve a foreign master. You don't need to do what my father did and leave your home in order to get a good education and access to opportunity. Because of Kenya's progress, because of your potential, you can build your future right here, right now. Now, like any country, Kenya is far from perfect, but it has come so far in just my lifetime. After a bitter struggle, Kenyans claimed their independence just a few years after I was born, and after decades of one-party rule, Kenya embraced a multi-party system in the 1990s, just as I was beginning my own political career in the United States. Tragically, just under a decade ago, Kenya was nearly torn apart by violence at the same time that I was running for my first campaign for president. And I remember hearing the reports of thousands of innocent people being killed or driven from their homes. And from a distance, it seemed like the Kenya that I knew, a Kenya that was able to reach beyond ethnic and tribal lines, that it might split apart across those lines of tribe and ethnicity. But look what happened. The people of Kenya chose not to be defined by the hatreds of the past. You chose a better history. The voices of ordinary people and political leaders and civil society did not eliminate all these divisions, but you addressed the divisions and differences peacefully. And a new constitution was put in place declaring that every person has inherent dignity and the right to have that dignity respected and protected. A competitive election went forward, not without problems, but without the violence that so many had feared. In other words, Kenyans chose to stay together. You chose the path of Harambee. And in part because of this political stability, Kenya's economy is also emerging. And the entrepreneurial spirit that people rely on to survive in the streets of Kibera can now be seen in new businesses across the country, from the city square to the smallest villages. M-Pesa is changing the way people use money. New investment is making Kenya a hub for regional trade. When I came here as a U.S. Senator, I pointed out that South Korea's economy was the same as Kenya's when I was born, and then was 40 times larger than Kenya's. Think about that. Started at the same place. South Korea had gone here and Kenya was here. But today that gap has been cut in half, just in the last decade, which means Kenya is making progress. And meanwhile, Kenya continues to carve out a distinct place in the community of nations as a source of peacekeepers for places torn apart by conflict, a host for refugees driven from their homes, a leader for conservation, following the footprints of Wangari Maathai. Kenya is one of the places on this continent that truly observes freedom of the press and their fearless journalists and courageous civil society members. And in the United States, we see the legacy of Kip Keino every time a Kenyan wins one of our marathons. And maybe the First Lady of Kenya is going to win one soon. I told the President he has to start running with his wife. We want him to stay fit. So there's much to be proud of, much progress to lift up. It's a good news story. But we also know the progress is not complete. There are still problems that shadow ordinary Kenyans every day. Challenges that can deny you your livelihood and sometimes deny you lives. As in America and so many countries around the globe, economic growth has not always been broadly shared. Sometimes people at the top do very well, but ordinary people still struggle. Today, a young child in Nyanza province is 4 times more likely to die than a child in Central province, even though they are equal in dignity in the eyes of God. That's a gap that has to be closed. A girl in Rift Valley is far less likely to attend secondary school than a girl in Nairobi. That's a gap that has to be closed. Across the country, one study shows corruption costs Kenyans 250,000 jobs every year, because every shilling that's paid as a bribe could be put into the pocket of somebody who's actually doing an honest day's work. And despite the hard-earned political progress that I spoke of, those political gains still have to be protected. New laws and restrictions could close off the space where civil society gives individual citizens a voice and holds leaders accountable. Old tribal divisions and ethnic divisions can still be stirred up. I want to be very clear here. A politics that's based solely on tribe and ethnicity is a politics that's doomed to tear a country apart. It is a failure of imagination. Of course, here in Kenya, we also know the specter of terrorism has touched far too many lives. And we remember the Americans and Kenyans who died side by side in the attack on our embassy in the 90s. We remember the innocent Kenyans who were taken from us at Westgate Mall. We weep for the nearly 150 people slaughtered at Garissa, including so many students who had such a bright future before them. We honor the memory of so many other innocent Kenyans whose lives have been lost in this struggle. So Kenya is at a crossroads, a moment filled with peril, but also enormous promise. And with the rest of my time here today, I'd like to talk about how you can seize the moment, how you can make sure we leave behind a world that's better, a world that we've borrowed from our children. When I first came to Sub-Saharan Africa as president, I made clear my strong belief that the future of Africa is up to Africans. For too long, I think that many looked to the outside for salvation and focused on somebody else being at fault for the problems of the continent. And as my sister said, ultimately, we are each responsible for our own destiny. And I'm here as president of a country that sees Kenya as an important partner. I'm here as a friend who wants Kenya to succeed. And the pillars of that success are clear: strong democratic governance, development that provides opportunity for all people and not just some, a sense of national identity that rejects conflict for a future of peace and reconciliation. And today we can see that future for Kenya on the horizon, but tough choices are going to have to be made in order to arrive at that destination. In the United States, I always say that what makes America exceptional is not the fact that we're perfect. It's the fact that we struggle to improve. We're self-critical. We work to live up to our highest values and ideals, knowing that we're not always going to achieve them perfectly, but we keep on trying to perfect our union. And what's true for America is also true for Kenya. You can't be complacent and accept the world just as it is. You have to imagine what the world might be and then push and work towards that future. Progress requires that you honestly confront the dark corners of our own past, extend rights and opportunities to more of your citizens, see the differences and diversity of this country as a strength, just as we in America try to see the diversity of our country as a strength and not a weakness. So you can choose the path to progress, but it requires making some important choices. First and foremost, it means continuing down the path of a strong, more inclusive, more accountable, and transparent democracy. You know, democracy begins with a peacefully elected government. It begins with elections, but it doesn't stop with elections. So your Constitution offers a roadmap to governance that's more responsive to the people through protections against unchecked power, more power in the hands of local communities. For this system to succeed, there also has to be space for citizens to exercise their rights. And we saw the strength of Kenya's civil society in the last election when groups collected reports of incitement so that violence could be stopped before it spun out of control. And the ability of citizens to organize and advocate for change, that's the oxygen upon which democracy depends. You know, democracy is sometimes messy, and for leaders, sometimes it's frustrating. Democracy means that somebody's always complaining about something. Nobody is ever happy in a democracy about their government. If you make one person happy, somebody else is unhappy. Then sometimes somebody who you made happy, later on now they're not happy. They say, "What have you done for me lately?" But that's the nature of democracy. That's why it works, is because it's constantly challenging leaders to up their game and to do better. And such civic participation and freedom is also essential for rooting out the cancer of corruption. Now, I want to be clear. Corruption is not unique to Kenya. I mean, I want everybody to understand that there's no country that's completely free of corruption. Certainly, here in the African continent, there are many countries that deal with this problem, and I want to assure you I speak about it wherever I go, not just here in Kenya. So I don't want everybody to get too sensitive. But the fact is, too often, here in Kenya, as is true in other places, corruption is tolerated because that's how things have always been done. People just think that that is sort of the normal state of affairs. And there was a time in the United States where that was true too. My hometown of Chicago was infamous for Al Capone and you know, the mob and organized crime corrupting law enforcement. But what happened was that over time people got fed up, and leaders stood up and they said, "We're not going to play that game anymore." And you changed the culture and you changed habits. Here in Kenya, it's time to change habits and decisively break that cycle, because corruption holds back every aspect of economic and civil life. It's an anchor that weighs you down and prevents you from achieving what you could. If you need to pay a bribe and hire somebody's brother who's not very good and doesn't come to work in order to start a business, well, that's going to create less jobs for everybody. If electricity's going to one neighborhood because they're well connected and not another neighborhood, that's going to limit development of the country as a whole. If someone in public office is taking a cut that they don't deserve, that's taking away from those who are paying their fair share. So this is not just about changing one law, although it's important to have laws on the books that are actually being enforced. It's important that not only low-level corruption is punished, but folks at the top, if they are taking from the people, that has to be addressed as well. But it's not something that is just fixed by laws or that any one person can fix. It requires a commitment by the entire nation, leaders and citizens, to change habits and to change culture. Tough laws need to be on the books. And the good news is your government is taking some important steps in the right direction. People who break the law and violate the public trust need to be prosecuted. NGOs have to be allowed to operate, who shine a spotlight on what needs to change. And ordinary people have to stand up and say, enough is enough. It's time for a better future. And as you take these steps, I promise that America will continue to be your partner in supporting investments in strong democratic institutions. Now, We're also going to work with you to pursue the second pillar of progress, and that is development that extends economic opportunity and dignity for all of Kenya's people. You know, America partners with Kenya in areas where you're making enormous progress, and we focus on what Kenyans can do for themselves in building capacity. On entrepreneurship, where Kenya's becoming an engine for innovation. On access to power, where Kenya is developing clean energy that can reach more people. On the important issue of climate change, where Kenya's recent goal to reduce its emissions has put it in the position of being a leader on the continent. On food security, where Kenyan crops are producing more to meet the demands of your people and a global market. And on health, where Kenya has struck huge blows against HIV, AIDS, and other diseases, while building up the capacity to provide better care in your communities. America is also partnering with you on an issue that's fundamental to Kenya's future. We are investing in youth. We are investing in the young people of Kenya and the young people of this continent. Robert F. Kennedy once said, "It is a revolutionary world that we live in, and it is the young people who must take the lead." It's the young people who must take the lead. So through our Young African Leaders Initiative, we are empowering and connecting young people. Connecting young people from across the continent who are filled with energy and optimism and idealism and are going to take Africa to new heights. And these young people, they're not weighed down by the old ways. They're creating a new path. And these are the elements for success in this 21st century. To continue down this path of progress, it will be vital for Kenya to recognize that no country can achieve its full potential unless it draws on the talents of all its people, and that must include the half of Kenyans, maybe a little more than half, who are women and girls. Now, I'm going to spend a little time on this just for a second. Every country and every culture has traditions that are unique and help make that country what it is. But just because something is a part of your past doesn't make it right. It doesn't mean that it defines your future. You know, look at us in the United States. Recently, we've been having a debate about the Confederate flag. Some of you may be familiar with this. This was a symbol for those states who fought against the Union to preserve slavery. Now, as a historical artifact, it's important. But some have argued that it's just a symbol of heritage that should fly in public spaces. The fact is, it was a flag that flew over an army that fought to maintain a system of slavery and racial subjugation. So we should understand our history, but we should also recognize that it sends a bad message to those who were liberated from slavery and oppression. And in part because of unspeakable tragedy that took place recently, where a young man who was a fan of the Confederate flag and racial superiority shot helpless people in a church. More and more Americans of all races are realizing now that that flag should come down. Just because something's a tradition doesn't make it right. Well, so around the world, there is a tradition of repressing women and treating them differently and not giving them the same opportunities, and husbands beating their wives, and children not being sent to school. Those are traditions. Treating women and girls as second-class citizens, those are bad traditions. They need to change. They're holding you back. Treating women as second-class citizens is a bad tradition. It holds you back. There's no excuse for sexual assault or domestic violence. There's no reason that young girls should suffer genital mutilation. There's no place in civilized society for the early or forced marriage of children. These traditions may date back centuries. They have no place in the 21st century. These are issues of right and wrong in any culture. But they're also issues of success and failure. Any nation that fails to educate its girls or employ its women and allowing them to maximize their potential is doomed to fall behind in the global economy. You know, we're in a sports center. Imagine if you have a team and you don't let half of the team play. That's stupid. That makes no sense. And the evidence shows that communities that give their daughters the same opportunities as their sons, they are more peaceful, they are more prosperous, they develop faster, they are more likely to succeed. That's true in America, that's true here in Kenya. It doesn't matter. And that's why one of the most successful development policies you can pursue is giving girls an education and removing the obstacles that stand between them and their dreams. And by the way, if you educate girls, they grow up to be moms, and they, because they're educated, are more likely to produce educated children. So, Kenya will not succeed if it treats women and girls as second-class citizens. I want to be very clear about that. Now, this leads me to the third pillar of progress, and that's choosing a future of peace and reconciliation. There are real threats out there. President Kenyatta and I spent a lot of time discussing the serious threat from al-Shabaab that Kenya faces. The United States faces similar threats of terrorism. We are grateful for the sacrifices made by Kenyans on the front lines as part of AMISOM. We're proud of the efforts that we're making to strengthen Kenya's capabilities through our new security governance initiative. We're going to stand shoulder to shoulder with you in this fight against terrorism for as long as it takes. But as I mentioned yesterday, it is important to remember that violent extremists want us to turn against one another. That's what terrorists typically try to exploit. They know that they are a small minority. They know that they can't win conventionally. So what they try to do is target societies where they can exploit divisions. That's what happens in Iraq. That's what happens around the world. That's what happened in Northern Ireland. Terrorists who try to sow chaos, they must be met with force, and they must also be met, though, with a forceful commitment to uphold the rule of law and respect for human rights, and to treat everybody who's peaceful and law-abiding fairly and equally. Extremists who prey on distrust must be defeated by communities who stand together and stand for something different. And the most important example here is that the United States and Kenya both have Muslim minorities, but those minorities make enormous contributions to our countries. These are our brothers, they are our sisters, and so in both our countries we have to reject calls that allow us to be divided. This is true for any diverse society. And Kenya is rich with diversity, with many dozens of tribes and ethnicities and languages and religious groups. And time and again, just as we've seen the dangers of religious or ethnic violence, we've seen that Kenya is stronger when Kenyans stand united with a sense of national identity. That was the case on December 12, 1963, when cities and villages across this country celebrated the birth of a nation. It was true in 2010, when Kenya replaced the anarchy of ethnic violence with the order of a new constitution. So we can all appreciate our own identities, our bloodlines, our beliefs, our backgrounds. That tapestry is what makes us who we are. But the history of Africa, which is both the cradle of human progress and a crucible of conflict, shows us that when we define ourselves narrowly, in opposition to somebody just because they're of a different tribe or race or religion, and we ignore who's a good person or a bad person, are they working hard or not, are they honest or not, are they peaceful or violent? When we start making distinctions solely based on status and not what people do, then we're taking a wrong path, and we inevitably suffer in the end. This is why Martin Luther King called on people to be judged not by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. And in the same way, people should not be judged by their last name or their religious faith, but by their content of their character and how they behave. Are they good citizens? Are they good people? In the United States, we embrace the motto, e pluribus unum. In Latin, that means out of many, one. In Kenya, Harambee, we are in this together. Whatever the challenge, you will be stronger if you face it not as Christians or Muslims, Maasai, Kikuyu, Luo, any other tribe, but as Kenyans. And ultimately, that unity is the source of strength that will empower you to seize this moment of promise. That's what will help you root out corruption. That's what will strengthen democratic institutions. That's what will help you combat inequality. That's what will help you extend opportunity and educate youth and face down threats and embrace reconciliation. So I want to say, particularly to the young people here today, Kenya is on the move. Africa is on the move. You are poised to play a bigger role in this world as the shadows of the past are replaced by the light that you offer an increasingly interconnected world. And in the light of this new day, we have to learn to see ourselves in one another. We have to see that we are connected. Our fates are bound together. Because in the end, we're all part of one tribe, the human tribe. And no matter who we are or where we come from or what we look like or who we love or what God we worship, we're connected. Our fates are bound up with one another. Kenya holds within it all that diversity, and with diversity sometimes comes difficulty. But I look to Kenya's future filled with hope, and I'm hopeful because of you, the people of Kenya, especially the young people. There are some amazing examples of what's going on right now with young people. I'm hopeful because of a young man named Richard Ruto Torosia. Richard helped build Yes, Youth Can. I like the phrase, yes, Youth Can. It became one of the most prominent civil society organizations in Kenya with over 1 million members. And after the violence of 2007, 2008, Yes, Youth Can stood up to incitement, helped bring opportunity to young people in places that were scarred by conflict. That's the kind of young leadership that we need. I'm hopeful because of a young woman named Josephine Kulea. So Josephine founded Samburu Girls Foundation, and she's already helped to rescue over 1,000 girls from abuse and forced marriage and help place them in schools. A member of the Samburu tribe herself, she's personally planned rescue missions to help girls as young as 6 years old. And she explains that the longer a girl is in school, everything for her income, for her family, for this country, everything changes. She gives me hope. I'm hopeful because of a young woman named Jamila Abbas. So Jamila founded M-Farm, which is a mobile platform that is already used by over 14,000 people across Kenya. M-Farm makes it easy for farmers to get information that lets them match their crops with what the market demands. And studies show that it can help farmers double their sales. So here's what Jamila said. I love Kenya because you feel you are home anywhere you go. Home anywhere you go. That's the Kenya that welcomed me nearly 30 years ago as a young man. You helped make me feel at home, and standing here today as President of the United States, when I think about those young people and all the young people in attendance here, you still make me feel at home. And I'm confident that your future is going to be written across this country and across this continent by young people like you. Young men and women who don't have to struggle under a colonial power, who don't have to look overseas to realize your dreams. Yes, you can realize your dreams right here, right now. We have not inherited this land from our forebears. We have borrowed it from our children. So now's the time for us to do the hard work of living up to that inheritance, of building a Kenya where the inherent dignity of every person is respected and protected, and there's no limit to what a child can achieve. I am here to tell you that the United States of America will be a partner for you every step of the way. God bless you. Thank you. Asante sana. Habari Gioni. President Kenyatta, the lovely Madam First Lady, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I want to once again just express my deepest gratitude to you and the Kenyan people for the incredible hospitality that you've shown me and my delegation, including the members of Congress who are here today and are doing outstanding work. You know, my visits here as a younger man, I could have never imagined the outpouring of friendship that I feel today. And so I feel like my given African name to be truly blessed. The presence of the members of Congress who are here today, I think it describes and expresses the deep support for a strong partnership with Africa and with Kenya. We were able to get the AGOA bill passed, and those of you who know American politics, there aren't too many things where Republicans and Democrats agree these days. But expanding trade and investment and deepening our relationship with Africa is something that garnered bipartisan support. And it's an indication of how the American people feel. Part of what makes this a special evening for me is the presence of my family members who are here. You know, my grandmother, Mama Sarah, who told me I had to come back to Kenya. And when she says you should do something, generally you have to do it. I've told this story before. The first time that I visited Kogelo, Alma and I and my brothers were there. Mama Sarah speaks Swahili and Luo, and I speak neither. And so Alma was serving as a translator. And I think about a half a day had passed before suddenly she turns to Alma and says something. And Alma starts laughing, and I said, "What'd she say?" She says, "He goes to Harvard. If he's so smart, how come he can't talk to his grandmother?" Which was a good point. My siblings are here, aunts, uncles, and so tonight I welcome all of them to a somewhat unusual Obama family reunion. I suspect that some of my critics back home are suggesting that I'm back here to look for my birth certificate. That is not the case. But what is true is that obviously there are emotions to a visit like this. Memories come rushing back. When I was in college and my father was here, I wrote him a letter telling him of my hope to visit. And he wrote me back and he said, "Dear son, even if it's only for a few days, the important thing is that you know your people." Now, he died in an accident before I was able to make that trip. But in fact, when I came, I did get to know the people of Kenya. And although, once again, I'm here only for a few days, I remain grateful for that relationship. I've seen the resolve and the determination to pull together under a new constitution as one people. I've seen your dynamism as you've built the largest economy in East Africa. I've seen the resilience, as in the recent reopening of the Westgate Mall, which shows that the spirit of the Kenyan people cannot be broken. And I've seen it in the friendship between our peoples, particularly our young people. As many of you know, our Mandela Fellows program invites promising African youth to the United States so they can develop skills and training, forge relationships as future leaders here in Africa, and we learn from them as well. And it's one of the most important ways that we invest in Africa's future. It's something I'm very passionate about personally. In fact, at this very moment, as part of this program, there are 40 young Kenyans across the United States, living and working and learning, but also sharing Kenyan culture with their American hosts. Americans are learning Swahili, they're eating chapati, and they're listening to Kenyan music. In California, they've been dancing to Suriako. So here tonight and across the United States, Kenyans and Americans are coming together. We're understanding each other better. We're finding new ways to partner. And I believe that if we can build on what we've accomplished on this visit, then we can achieve even more in the years to come for our people, for our beautiful lands, for our freedom, for peace. I was reflecting on what President Kenyatta said about the past and history. And our fathers were people who lived at the same time and went through independence of this country at the same time, took different paths, obviously. My father was significantly younger. And it's true that it would have been hard for them to imagine how their sons might be sitting here today. But there's an expression that says, we plant a tree not because we will enjoy its shade, but because our children and grandchildren will. And so I'd like to propose a toast not only to this generation of Kenyans and Africans, not only to future generations of Kenyans and Africans and Americans, but also to our forefathers and our foremothers who laid the groundwork, who planted the seed, so that we could enjoy a little bit of shade. To the people of Kenya and to the people of the United States of America, Mungu abariki Kenya.
Please be seated. Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin by saying that we have had an excellent afternoon where we've had very frank and indeed very fruitful discussions with President Obama on a variety of issues of mutual interest, both to Kenya and the United States. This follows the signing of agreements covering areas of mutual interest such as security, visa reciprocity, and the development cooperation, amongst other things. Our discussions affirmed that Kenya and the United States share deep values and many areas of critical interest, and naturally, therefore, our peoples and governments speak the same language on many issues. Kenya is an open, democratic society underpinned by our embrace of democracy. We are deepening that democracy while fighting global terrorists who seek to destroy our way of life. Left undefeated, they will redraw the international system and make room for violent extremism and tyranny. We agreed together that we can build a future in which our people of all faiths, cultures, live peacefully together, with the rights of individuals and minorities protected, and those in power held to account by strong and inclusive institutions. I also expressed to President Obama that without building shared prosperity, our vision of a secure Africa, and indeed a stable world, will remain a fragile dream. It is for this reason that Kenya, an increasingly dynamic country, is continuously opening new trade and investment frontiers across the world. I conveyed the hope that during his tenure in office, the United States would look to develop a strong strategic partnership with Africa, built on shared values and interests. I also expressed the hope that his visit will allow him and the people of the United States to gain an even deeper insight on Africa's challenges, and this will enable them to see these challenges as an expression of great opportunities that are available here. The United States is a country of entrepreneurs with a unique capacity to build transformative businesses, and I hope that these entrepreneurs and investors will recognize and act on the immense opportunities Kenya and Africa present. And in this regard, I also express my appreciation of his leadership in shepherding the renewal of AGOA. Beyond shared values, we are brothers and sisters, fellow travelers in the struggle for a better world for all. And we therefore need to upscale our partnerships in agriculture, infrastructure, and affordable energy. I also expressed my own commitment to ensuring that on our part we will continue to take the steps that provide the proper conditions for a vibrant ecosystem for investors and entrepreneurs. We agreed to continue to engage one another so that we can strengthen what is already a robust relationship. And indeed, I look forward to hosting President Obama later this evening, and indeed also seeing him at the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly in September. President Obama, once again, on my own behalf, on behalf of my government and the people of Kenya, let me thank you for your support, as evidenced by the various agreements signed between our two governments, and indeed your willingness to engage Kenya in the true spirit of partnership. It's now my pleasure to introduce the President to make some brief remarks as well. Thank you.
Habari, President Kenyatta, let me just reiterate what I said at the summit earlier to you and the people of Kenya. Thank you for the extraordinary welcome that you've given me and for the same kindness that you've shown me since my first visit to Kenya nearly 30 years ago. I'm proud to return as the first U.S. president to ever visit Kenya while still in office. I need to give a special acknowledgement to everybody in Alego and Kogelo and Kisumu. I'm well aware, however, that the enthusiasm that we're seeing today from my visit is a reflection of something bigger, and that's the desire among the Kenyan people for a deeper partnership with America, and that's why I'm here. My work with President Kenyatta today has been rooted in our shared recognition that the interests of both our nations and the lives of both our peoples can be advanced if our countries deepen and expand our cooperation, and that's what we've agreed to today. First, I want to salute the Kenyan people for their hard-won progress in strengthening their democracy. Millions voted for the new constitution, one of the most progressive in Africa, with its strong protections for freedom of expression, assembly, and the press, and its emphasis on equality and against discrimination. The election 2 years ago was competitive and largely peaceful. Kenya has a determined, active, feisty press, as we see here today. And as I've said elsewhere, a free press helps make a nation stronger and more successful. And it makes us, leaders, more effective because it demands greater accountability. Kenya has a vibrant civil society, which is essential for any democracy. And I look forward to meeting tomorrow with representatives from civil society who stand up for the dignity and the rights of all Kenyans. Dignity begins, of course, with the ability to provide a decent life for our families. And today, President Kenyatta and I agreed to expand the economic partnerships between our peoples that can provide broad-based prosperity. We will extend student and business visas for up to 5 years for Kenyans traveling to the United States and for Americans traveling to Kenya. This will make it easier for university students to complete their studies and for businesses to make long-term plans. Our governments are also working to launch direct flights between Kenya and the United States as soon as possible. As part of our Young African Leaders Initiative, we'll also continue to support promising Kenyan youth as they work to become future leaders in business, civil society, and government. Now that we've renewed the African Growth and Opportunity Act, or AGOA, for another 10 years, I discussed with President Kenyatta how we can expand our economic cooperation, and we're especially focused on infrastructure and energy, two keys to economic growth. Our Power Africa initiative is supporting Kenya's goal of achieving its national energy needs, electricity for Kenyans, by 2030. And this includes innovations that bring power to rural Kenyans who are off the grid, as I saw earlier today at the Global Entrepreneurship Summit. I also want to commend Kenya, a leader in clean energy, for announcing its post-2020 target to limit carbon emissions as part of our fight against climate change. Together, we are confronting insidious threats to Kenya's prosperity. President Kenyatta, I want to commend you on your announced commitment to rooting out corruption. With the joint commitment we've agreed to today, the United States will offer advice and technical assistance to support Kenya as it takes additional steps to increase transparency and accountability and to strengthen institutions that fight corruption. So we're making important commitments, and now we need to work together to fulfill them. Because if Kenya can put in place the habits and institutions of good governance, it can help unleash even greater growth and investment and prosperity for the Kenyan people. And that'll be good for everybody. Our countries are also close partners in the fight against poachers and traffickers that threaten Kenya's world-famous wildlife. The United States has a ban already on the commercial import of elephant ivory. I can announce that we're proposing a new rule that bans the sale of virtually all ivory across our state lines, which will eliminate the market for illegal ivory in the United States. On security, the United States and Kenya are already strong partners, and today we reaffirmed that we stand united in the face of terrorism. Earlier, I had the opportunity to meet with survivors and families of victims of the bombing of our U.S. Embassy in 1998 in the face of despicable violence, such as the attack on Garissa University College and the Westgate Mall. The Kenyan people have shown incredible resolve and remarkable resilience. I also want to pay tribute to the sacrifices of Kenyan forces who serve in the African Union-led mission against al-Shabaab in Somalia, and to thank Kenya for hosting so many Somali refugees who are the victims of al-Shabaab. Today, we discussed deepening our security cooperation. As part of our security governance initiative, our governments signed an action plan yesterday in which we'll support Kenya's efforts to strengthen its judiciary, police, and border security. We also discussed broader efforts to counter violent extremism here in Kenya and around the world, efforts that are advanced when there is rule of law, respect for human rights, a space for civil society and peaceful dissent, and when we welcome all communities as our partners. All our nations are going to have to work together in order for us to be successful. We also had the opportunity to discuss regional security issues, and we focused in particular on the terrible conflict in South Sudan, which has taken so many lives that cause unbearable suffering for the South Sudanese people. The situation is dire, and we agree that the best way to stop the fighting is for South Sudanese leaders to put their country first with a peace agreement that ends the fighting. We also discussed Burundi, where the recent elections were not credible. And we're calling on the government and the opposition to come together in a dialogue that leads to a political solution to the crisis and avoids the loss of more innocent life. And finally, we're going to keep investing in the health and well-being of our people. Our Feed the Future initiative is focused on reducing hunger, malnutrition, and poverty. We're working together to ensure that girls have access to education and that women are protected from violence. Today, I can announce that Kenya will be part of our DREAMS initiative to help keep adolescent girls safe and AIDS-free. And across Africa, Kenya and the United States will keep working to strengthen public health systems and deal with outbreaks and diseases before they become epidemics. Together, we can save lives. So, President Kenyatta, thank you for the progress and new commitments that we've made today. I know that Kenya faces persistent challenges, as does the United States, but I will tell you that every time I come here, I'm struck by the dynamism and the hopefulness, the determination and the talent of the Kenyan people. And I look forward to the opportunity to speak to the people of Kenya tomorrow about the future that we can build together. So, asante sana. You want me to start? Okay. Mr. Jeff Mason.
Thank you very much. Mr. President, I'd like to ask about two topics. First of all, what more specifically can the U.S. do to help Kenya in the fight against al-Shabaab? Do you still see Somalia as a counterterrorism model? And are you concerned about Kenyan authorities using counterterrorism as an excuse to commit human rights violations? Secondly, can you comment on the state of gay and lesbian, the treatment of gay and lesbians in Kenya, which rights groups have called dismal and President Kenyatta has called a non-issue. For you, sir, President Kenyatta, on the same themes, what more do you need from the United States to help fight al-Shabaab, and are you getting it? And can you please also respond to criticism about the state of gay rights in your country?
Well, this was an extensive topic of conversation and concrete action that we're now taking. There has been extensive and effective counterterrorism cooperation between the United States and Kenya, dealing with primarily threats from al-Shabaab. In part because of the actions that we've taken, not just with Kenya, but with AFRICOM, and the efforts collectively of countries to work together, Uganda, Ethiopia, others. We have systematically reduced the territory that al-Shabaab controls. We have been able to decrease their effective control within Somalia and have weakened those networks operating here in East Africa. That doesn't mean the problem's solved. As is true around the world, what we find is that we can degrade significantly the capacities of these terrorist organizations, but they can still do damage. The number of individuals involved in Garissa or Westgate Mall were not large, but when they're willing to target soft targets and civilians and are prepared to die, they can still do a lot of damage. And so what we discussed was the importance of, number one, continuing the effort to root out al-Shabaab's capacity inside of Somalia, working jointly. And as we speak, Kenya is working with Ethiopia and with the United States and others to further degrade al-Shabaab's space of operations inside of Somalia. So we have to keep that pressure going, even as we're strengthening the Somalian government, because part of the reason that al-Shabaab was able to emerge as a significant threat to the region was a non-functioning government, effectively a failed state in Somalia for so long. There is now a government and a cabinet that is credible and is working with the international community in Mogadishu. And even as we put military pressure on al-Shabaab, we also have to make sure that we're standing up an effective governance structure inside of Somalia, and we've made progress there. In addition, we have to continue to make progress in intelligence sharing and being able to identify and prevent threats before they occur here in Kenya and elsewhere in the region. Part of our announcement today involves additional funding, additional assistance that we're providing the Kenyan security forces to deal with these very specific counterterrorism threats, as well as additional training and assistance to make sure that the approach that's taken in rooting out potential terrorist threats don't create more problems than they're solving. And this goes to the other element of the question that you asked. What we have found, sometimes through hard experience, and I shared this with President Kenyatta, is that if you paint any particular community with too broad a brush, if in reaction to terrorism you are restricting legitimate organizations, reducing the scope of peaceful organization, then that can have the inadvertent effect of actually increasing the pool of recruits for terrorism and resentment in communities that feel marginalized. And I shared with him that one of the strengths in the United States, part of the reason why, although we're seeing potential lone wolf attacks inside the United States, that we have not seen the sort of systematic networks and cells developing in many of our Muslim communities or immigrant communities inside of the United States is that we've been very conscious to make sure that law enforcement is reaching out and cooperating and working with them because they are our partners in this process. And the only way we're going to fight the poison that's being fed to them, to their young people through social media is to make sure that they're our eyes and our ears, and they're counseling us on how we can more effectively build trust and increase cooperation. And that's proven successful. The same will be true here in Kenya. And I was very clear to President Kenyatta, ultimately, the Kenyan government is accountable to the Kenyan people. And you know, it will find its way through this process in cooperation with us, but our experience and best practices tell us that rule of law, respecting civil society, in fact, embracing civil society, particularly in those communities that may be targeted for recruitment by organizations like Al-Shabaab, that becomes more important the more significant the threat is. And not only is that practical advice, but it's the right thing to do. And it's consistent with the Kenyan Constitution and with the values that you heard President Kenyatta espouse. Similarly, with respect to the rights of gays and lesbians, I've been consistent all across Africa on this. I believe in the principle of treating people equally under the law, and that they are deserving of equal protection under the law, and that the state should not discriminate against people based on their sexual orientation. And I say that recognizing that there may be people who have different religious or cultural beliefs, but the issue is, how does the state operate relative to people? If you look at the history of countries around the world, when you start treating people differently, not because of any harm they're doing anybody, but because they're different, that's the path whereby freedoms begin to erode. And bad things happen. And when a government gets in the habit of treating people differently, those habits can spread. And as an African American in the United States, I am painfully aware of the history of what happens when people are treated differently under the law. And were all sorts of rationalizations that were provided by the power structure for decades in the United States for segregation and Jim Crow and slavery, and they were wrong. So I'm unequivocal on this. If somebody is a law-abiding citizen who is going about their business and working in a job and obeying the traffic signs and doing all the other things that good citizens are supposed to do, and not harming anybody, the idea that they are going to be treated differently or abused because of who they love is wrong. Full stop. And, you know, the state does not need to weigh in on, you know, religious doctrine. The state just has to say, we're going to treat everybody equally under the law. And then everybody else can have their own opinions. All right?
President Kenyatta, could you address the questions as well, please?
Yeah, we'll address them. First and foremost, I couldn't agree more than what President Obama has just said, especially with regard to the issue of the fight against terrorism. The support and the partnership that we have with the United States from an intelligence point of view, from a counterterrorism point of view, but more importantly, as he's also just mentioned, working with societies and how to prevent, especially extremists from finding a bed of fodder for them to be able to develop and to grow and to nurture the terrorists of tomorrow. You've also heard him say, and indeed we're truly grateful, his expansion under the agreements that we've signed of the cooperation and the assistance that we're getting from the United States. So as a country, as a government, we are satisfied with what we're doing. We need to expand that more because the battle that we're fighting is not a Kenyan war. Kenya just happens to be at the frontier of it, being a neighbor to a country that for a long time has not had any kind of formal government. We need to work much closer together to see how we can stabilize Somalia. We need to work much closer together to see how we can help the Somali government, which is in place, work together with its regional governments in order to continuously decrease the area and the space that Al-Shabaab and the like have to operate and to train and to export terror, not just to Kenya, but also to other parts of the world. So I'm looking forward to deepening the partnership that we already have, but we are satisfied with the kind of cooperation that we've had and the close working relationship between our various institutions. You raised the issue of human rights, and I mentioned earlier that the kind of fight we're having right now, this is an existential fight for us. This is something that we have not been familiar with. Kenya has always been a country that has respected different religions. This issue of terrorism is new to us. And as it is new, we learn with each and every step. We are improving our capacities and our methods of dealing with terrorism. We, as a country, are willing to learn. We have undertaken fundamental reforms in our police services to help us to deal with this particular problem. We are continuing to partner with friends like the United States who are giving us their own experiences as to how they have handled this particular problem, and we are keen to learn and to participate. And I am certain that as we move forward, as we get better, as we learn from others, we will be able to handle this situation in a manner that does not, as President Obama said, encourage this kind of activity going forward on the basis of either marginalization or people feeling that particular communities are being targeted. As a country, we have done a lot, especially under our new constitution, our new devolved system of government that is aimed at providing and ensuring equity and development across the country. We have put a lot of resources into some of the previously neglected areas. In fact, today, as we sit, a huge portion, approximately 40% of our national budget, is being invested in those areas in an attempt to ensure that all communities in our country feel that the government is for them all and that they are part and parcel of the social economic development of our country. So we will continue to improve, we will continue to learn, we will continue to participate with all communities, with civil society, to strengthen our partnership in order to ultimately be able to defeat this enemy. With regard to the second question, just like President Obama, I think we also need to be able to speak frankly about some of these things. And the fact of the matter is that Kenya and the United States, we share so many values. our common love for democracy, entrepreneurship, value for families. These are things that we share. But there are some things that we must admit we don't share. Our culture, our societies don't accept. It's very difficult for us to be able to impose on people that which they themselves do not accept. This is why I repeatedly say that for Kenyans today, the issue of gay rights is really a non-issue. We want to focus on other areas that are day-to-day living for our people. The health issues that we have discussed with President Obama, these are critical. Issues of ensuring inclusivity and of women, a huge section of society that is normally left out of the mainstream of economic development. What we can do in terms of infrastructure, what we can do in terms of education, in terms of our roads, in terms of giving our people power, encouraging entrepreneurship. These are the key focuses. Maybe once, like you have, overcome some of these challenges, we can begin to look at new ones. But as of now, the fact remains that this issue is not really an issue that is on the foremost mind of Kenyans, and that is the fact. Yeah.
Thank you very much. My name is Ken Mijungu, and I have two questions for President Obama and a question for President Uhuru Kenyatta. My first question to President Obama is, there has been a perception that Kenya and the US had a strained relationship right from the time that we had a new government. And in fact, we had several Western countries saying that indeed choices had consequences. Is you coming to Kenya sort of pressing a reset button to tell us that indeed you are ready to renew your relationship with this country that you've had a long-running relationship with for quite some years? And my second question is about the funding. Indeed, you have told us about several agreements that have been signed. Does it concern you, government, that indeed there is corruption it's a war that has been taken head-on by our very president, and in fact, some of his cabinet secretaries and PSs and top government officials are currently in court because of that? Does it concern you, government, that indeed you're spending money in a country that the president himself is concerned about the level of corruption? And to President Uhuru Kenyatta, there has also been a perception about Kenya looking increasingly east, especially after the general election in 2013 and the things that were said. So is this also a sort of an announcement that indeed our traditional partners, i.e. the US, we have family commitment to renewing our agreements that we had in place, and indeed we are going forward and working together? Thank you.
Well, first of all, we don't need a reset because the U.S.-Kenya relationship and cooperation continued robustly throughout my presidency. The fact that I didn't get here may have gotten people riled up, but frankly, given my familiarity and knowledge with Kenya, the fact that there were many countries across this vast continent that I had never visited, it was always my intention to get to Kenya, but I wanted to make sure that people didn't think I was playing favorites so quick immediately after I was elected. Now, to be honest, and I think President Kenyatta would acknowledge this as well, there were deep concerns and tensions arising out of the violence that took place in an earlier election. We haven't made any secret about that. Accounting is being done of what happened there. And we continue to believe that norms have to be observed, and all countries, big and small, not just African countries, but all countries, should be held to high standards in terms of making sure that elections, democratic processes, don't lead to violence. The subsequent election that showed growth in the election process, the new constitution that reflects one of the most progressive articulations of the principles of freedom and human dignity on the continent. That signals, I think, a very positive direction in where Kenya is moving. President Kenyatta, during our meeting, acknowledged that there's still more work to be done. You know, our goal in dealing with all our partners is to be respectful, to recognize that ultimately sovereign countries have to make their own determinations about their destiny, but to be very clear about the values we care about. And we can engage and cooperate and work together and occasionally disagree, and that's not a rupture to the relationship. That's just the nature of friends. There are going to be times where we have disagreements. You just heard one before this. And that is part of the dialogue and the process that takes place between friends. With respect to corruption, I think it is absolutely the right thing to do for President Kenyatta to emphasize this. And as I stated to him during our meeting, this may be the biggest impediment to Kenya growing even faster and more people having even more opportunity. The fact that doing business and ordinary people just moving along in their lives here is constantly sapped by corruption at a high level and at a low level. You know, international businesses are concerned if the price of investing in Kenya is 5% or 10% going to some place that doesn't have to do with the project. It's just a math issue. If they've got a plan for a business, it's got a certain profit, and if suddenly some of that is taken off the top,